now is when the demons start to creep up and a driver starts to listen for any strange noise. But it's too late now. Mario Domínguez could coast across the line to his second career victory.
My career is like a story of perseverance and never giving up.
What an improbable victory here. Mario, take that helmet off quick. We want to have a chat to you.
The 2002 season was so hard. It was very difficult.
This team, which was founded by the late Tony Bettenhausen, great Champ Car Racing family name, has never had two cars finish in the top 10 in the same race, much less a 1-2.
With Roberto, we started developing a lot, and I started to finish on the podium constantly.
Oh, trouble indeed!
In Milwaukee, I crashed with Junqueira, but Paul was coming in behind, and he ended up being involved in that crash, and Mr. Forsythe was not happy.
Pacific Coast Motorsports, this is a second-year team, and they're expected to make a big announcement next week that will involve their participation with one team in the IndyCar series. They haven't announced their driver yet, but I have a feeling that this man, Mario Domínguez, will be at the Indy 500.
That was awesome because Pacific Coast gave me the shot, and I gave Pacific Coast also their very first podium.
All right, welcome back to Open Wheel Rewind. I'm your host, Ryan Nothhaft, and my guest today is Mario Domínguez, a two-time Car World Series winner, as well as the 2002 Car World Series Rookie of the Year. Mario, what an honor to have you here, man. Thanks for taking some time.
No, thank you, Ryan. The honor is all mine, and thank you for thinking about me to have me in your show.
Oh, of course. Hey, I follow you on Instagram. You have a great Instagram account, really high quality content. But I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what you're up to today as far as it goes with motorsports.
Well, basically, and thanks God, my whole life still revolves around motorsports and racing. I'm still racing. I'm racing in a class in Mexico called Mercedes Super Cup, which is like GT3 cars. Pretty much is the same cars as the Trans Am cars that I raced in the United States. Is the same chassis. It's built in the US by a brand called Howie, and it's got the same engine. It's about 690 horsepower, pretty fast. And it's a wonderful series that Michel Jourdain organizes, another former Champ Car IndyCar driver who raced against me, a fellow Mexican, and he organizes the championship. It's very cool. We race all around the country, so I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun to drive those cars. Paul Tracy came to race here once, and then they had a Legends Cup race, and all those cars were all the stars that used to race Champ Car, IndyCar, came to race in Mexico City during the Formula One Grand Prix, where like Oriol Servia came, Bruno Junqueira, Alex Tagliani, Paul Tracy, Max Papis, Mark Lundell, and a few others, Casey Mears, a few other guys came down, so that was sort of fun. So I'm still racing that. I am now also the lead commentator for the Formula One races in Mexico for the television, the most important television chain in Mexico called Televisa. So I'm doing that. I'm also coaching a few drivers. One of them is racing Formula 4, or will be racing Formula 4 in Mexico in 2026, and Formula 4 in the United States also in 2026. His name is Fernando Rivera, very young guy, very talented, 15 years old. And I'm racing another young guy who's 18. His name is Alejandro Bobadilla. He will be racing in the Formula 3 Americas in the United States. So coaching young drivers has become a lot of fun. I never planned on doing it, but I started to get a lot of calls, and it's fun, to pass on your knowledge to these young guys. That if I would have had someone like that when I was young to give me all that knowledge, my learning curve would have been much faster. And I also write about automobile industry in the Mexico's most important newspaper. And I'm sort of like an automobile industry journalist, if you might want to call that. And I test cars and I make reviews about them also on my social media. So the thing I love the most is racing and cars and all of that. I'm very fortunate to have my whole life revolved around cars. So that's fun. Keeps it fun.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're incredibly busy. I don't know how you balance all of that, but you mentioned your whole life revolves
It's
around
hard.
cars. So, yeah, I bet. Why don't we go back to the beginning? I mean, you started out in karts as a young kid. What sparked your interest in motorsports to begin with?
I don't know. I guess I just had it in my blood because I don't come from a family of motorsports. I just, ever since I can remember, I wanted to race, and I cried, literally cried every single day for 3 years to my father. So he would buy me a go-kart. So from 7 to 10 years old, that's pretty much all I did until he finally accepted. And he bought me a go-kart here in Mexico. And then I also cried for a bit, so he would allow me to race. And I raced the championship that year, and I became national champion. So then my father really liked it because he thought, I guess he saw that I was naturally talented to do it. So he supported me as much as he could with a lot of sacrifices and everything that is involved for parents to support their children when they're going racing. This is very expensive. But I was very lucky to have my father and my whole family support me in this venture.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the success you had. I think you won 3 karting championships. You eventually went on to win the Formula 3 Mexico championship. I'm wondering during this time period, you obviously ended up in the United States, specifically in the Kart World Series, but at this time, did you have goals of maybe Formula 1 or NASCAR or IMSA, or was the goal always to go to America to race Indy cars?
Well, I always had the goal, of course, of Formula One or IndyCar because I used to love watching the Indy 500 and all the big stars and big heroes I had, like AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, of course, Emerson Fittipaldi, Rick Mears, Alonso Jr., all those guys I used to watch on television. It was amazing. And then IndyCar and Champ Car became very popular in Mexico because Adrian Fernandez started racing there. And it was just a natural way to go because the sponsors were focusing on it. And Adrian opened the doors for us. Even, believe it or not, in 1992, I raced one Indy Lights race together with Adrian Fernandez when he had just won the Formula 3 championship in Mexico and he moved to Indy Lights.
Yeah, Laguna
And I
Seca,
had
right?
won Laguna Seca. I had won the
Yep.
Formula Mazda championship in the US. And therefore, I got a free race in Indy Lights back then. So I raced there, and it was just sort of the natural way. Formula One 1992 was the last race that it came to Mexico. So then Champ Car and IndyCar started to become more and more popular here, thanks to Adrian. I could not stay racing in the US because of sponsorship. So I came down back to Mexico and started to find little teams here and there that would want to give me a ride or wanted to support me. Finally, I made it to a very, very good team called Herdez Competition Team, who was already sponsoring Michel Jourdain in the Champ Car World Series and IndyCar back then. And they are the ones that helped me move up the ladder. As I won in Mexico Formula 3, they sent me to Indy Lights, and then they gave me my shot at the Champ Cars in 2002.
Well, your first full-time race, I think in 1999 in Indy Lights, you actually ended up winning in Miami. Is that right? What are your memories from that day?
I know. It was basically unbelievable. I don't even know how I did it to this date. It was my first race and my first oval race ever. I had never raced an oval. And it was a complete Mexican team that went to race from Mexico that they had been racing here in Formula 3 and Formula 3000. They moved up to Indy Lights, and they had been there 1 year before. They selected me as a driver in 1999, along with an Irish guy called Derek Higgins, very, very fast guy who was racing in Mexico. And then my first oval race in Homestead, I got the pole position first. And I thought, oh my God, nobody's going to take me away from this one. So I drove as hard as I could, and I won the race, and it was pretty much unbelievable. I still can't believe it up to this date that I was able to win my first ever race in an oval and in Indy Lights. It's such a big category.
Yeah, and I think you raced for Herdez competition for what 2 years, and then I think in 2001 you ended up racing with Pac West Racing, which was a fantastic kart series team, but also had an Indy Lights team, and you were teammates with Dan Wheldon. What are your memories of teaming with Dan Wheldon?
Well, that was a very interesting year. I did have a little split with Herdez in 2001, so that's why I went to Pac West, and then it was a last minute thing, and I became teammates with Dan Wheldon. Dan was a great guy with a lot of personality, a big personality, but we didn't get along at all. Like at some point around the middle of the season, I had no problems with him, but all of a sudden he just stopped talking to me like out of nowhere. And Dan was like every race car driver is, but I think more than usual, very selfish. Like he would, for no reason, would want or would go crazy if I was faster than him or I finished the race in a better position than him. So we had a few altercations on the racetracks a couple of times where he took me out and things like that. And it was a tough time for Siggy Harkus, the team manager back then, because he had to keep us both under control. But at the end of the day, it was a good, very good experience to have a guy like that. And I was always very fond of him. And the fact that when he passed away was horrible. Up to this date, I still, it just really makes me so sad that such a nice guy and such a good race car driver, left us on that day in Vegas. But yeah, it was interesting being his teammate. And I was watching a documentary. Sorry to interrupt. Where when he was with Andretti and he was teammates with Canan and I think Brian Herda and a couple others. I think Frank Kitty or somebody, and they had the same thought. Dan was very selfish. Like he would not be a team player at all.
I was going to ask as a follow-up question, after you were teammates and you both moved up to your major league series respectively, you went to IRL, you went to Kart and Champ Car. Did you ever cross paths or have a chance to maybe mend some of those relationships that happen as teammates do, where they don't get along, but after the fact, they rekindle it? Or were you not able to cross paths after that?
Yes, we were for sure. We were, and even at the end of the year, we sort of, talked about it. We were fine, but being teammates, it's a hard thing. The first guy you have to beat is your teammate, and it was, I guess, Dan was very adamant about that. I wouldn't take any baloney, not beating me, and he would be very upset when I used to beat him. So it was interesting, but it was. Now that I look back, it was fun. At some point, it was we had a few close encounters.
Well, yeah, you guys wouldn't be the first teammates that didn't see eye to eye. So
Exactly.
you mentioned, yeah, well, you mentioned the break with Herdez there for a year, and you went to Pac West. But then in 2002, you obviously moved up to full-time kart or Champ Car at that time, back with Herdez and Bettenhausen. I guess two-part question: because you were with Pac West Racing, was there any opportunity to move into their program in Champ Car or kart? Or I guess in the second part of that question is, how did you rekindle the relationship with Herdez and end up at Bettenhausen?
Well, here's the deal. This is what happened. They made a test in 2000, with Michel Jourdain and I, and they said whoever was to be fastest in that test in Sebring would keep the seat for 2001 in the Champ Cars. And I ended up being faster, But at the end of the day, the owner Herdez decided no, that Michelle would stay in the seat. So I was upset. My manager, well, at that point, he was not my manager. He was the director of competition for Herdez. So he would decide who would be the driver in whatever category they sponsor, because they sponsor so many other categories. Not only Champ Cars, they sponsor in Mexico from boat racing to motorcycles to the Formula 3, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I'm going to quit, and you should quit too, because my job is to choose which driver goes where. And since they are not accepting my decision, I'm going to quit, and you should quit too. So I was very afraid, because at least there I had a steady sponsor. But so anyways, I quit, he quit. We raised some money for me to race Indy Lights again. The idea was to do Champ Car, but we couldn't get enough. So I raced with Pac West. And sure enough, with Pac West, I was much more competitive. And then before the end of the year, I got a call from Herdez, and they said, okay, we want you to come and race in 2002. So no, really, there was never a possibility for me to go to Pac West in the Champ Cars. And I think back then they had Scott Dixon, and they had maybe Mark Blundell. I don't remember
I think Mauricio Gugelmin.
who the other driver was. Gugelmin. They had Mauricio Gugelmin. Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up, racing with Bettenhausen for that 2002 season. Bluntly, they weren't known for being overly competitive with the bigger teams because of budget and whatnot. But you were still able to manage to get a win at the 2002 Surfers Paradise race. And granted, like the conditions were absurd as far as weather goes, and it was a pretty chaotic race. When you look back at that, what are your memories from that 2002 Surfers Paradise win?
Well, first of all, the 2002 season was so hard. It was very difficult because the car, as you say, was very uncompetitive. It was very hard to drive. We had this big disadvantage starting from the engines, because Ford would not lease us, Cosworth would not lease us the same engine as they were leasing the other teams. So it was slower. So we were already at a disadvantage. And then the setup-wise, engineering, the car was terrible. And I was a rookie, so that didn't help at all. So it was very hard. I showed a few signs of speed in a few races, and every time I qualified well, the car would break down. It was just hard. And then the race in Australia, basically, I just got lucky. They stopped the race at the right time when I was in first place, and we won. So we'll take that win for sure. It was very morally very good for the team and the sponsor, who had been investing millions and millions for so many years, Herdez, and never got any results. But it didn't, as a driver, it didn't taste that good. But as for the team and for the morale and everything, definitely was very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, and I hope you don't mind me asking, at the start of that race, there was that terrible accident because of the visibility was just so bad. And unfortunately, I mean, you were right in the thick of that. How scary was that for you in that accident? I mean, it's just very ugly looking on TV.
It was horrible because they started the race and nobody could see anything, and I was pretty much all the way to the back, so I could see even less. And I was actually going pretty slow. I was lifting because I couldn't see at all. And all of a sudden, I encountered a whole bunch of cars in front of me, and I went right like a bowling ball. I went right through them like a bowling ball, hit a few guys here and there. One of them was Shinji Nakano. I hit him. He flew up in the air over me, and he landed on top of Adrian Fernandez. And that's what hurt Adrian's neck. And my car was damaged in a few corners, or two, I think, or the front. But they were able to fix it because it took a long time to restart the race. They were able to fix it. And so we managed to start the race. A lot of guys did not manage to start the race because the cars were destroyed after that humongous crash.
From my perspective, and I've never worked in the racing industry, it seemed like maybe not a good idea to start that race due to the weather conditions. I felt like perhaps it was even forced because they didn't have the option of racing on Monday. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think they should have, shoulda, coulda, woulda. They had no option on racing on Monday. That is correct. In Australia, the track has to open on Monday because of the traffic. That was the rule. I think they should have started it in a single file, at first, not a regular with double, what do you call, double file start. I guess if they had started in a single file, it would have been much safer. Um, I like the fact that they try to let us race, because sometimes these days you see the Formula One races and it's ridiculous. And you get 2 drops of water and they stop the race, or they bring out the pace car. Basically the wet tires are there just to decorate, because they don't let the guys race anymore. So I think it's good that they should let people race, but maybe there are conditions here and there that they could have managed. But I think had they started at single file, it would have been not a huge crash like that. Or maybe yes, but you never know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then over the next 2 seasons, it seems from my perspective that the team improved a lot because you started having a lot more top 10 finishes. And I'm just wondering what you attribute to the enhanced performances over the next 2 seasons with Team Bettenhausen.
Well, yes, there was a huge improvement in many different ways. First of all, the engineering department. They started to do a lot more development with the chassis and the shocks, and they had the 7-post rig testing and some wind tunnel testing, a lot of stuff like that. New engineers, and the biggest thing was that they brought in Roberto Moreno, a very experienced guy who had been racing and had the opportunity to race in some of the best teams in Champ Car, sometimes as super sub, sometimes not. So when they brought Roberto, the whole idea to bring him was to develop the car. So he came up with a lot of knowledge that he knew what the top teams were running in terms of suspension settings and sort of the development things that they were doing to improve the cars. So also the fact that I had him, and when he would say the car was bad, people then would believe me, because in my first year, I would say the car was terrible, and they would not exactly believe me because they thought I was a rookie, so I wasn't given the same information. But the fact is that Michel Jourdain had been racing that car. That's why he was always at the back too, because the car was very hard to drive. And that same year, Michel went to Rahal, and all of a sudden, from Michel running usually last, started running to the top 3. So it's not like he forgot or he remembered how to drive, from one day to the next. So it just shows you how important to have a competitive car is. And sure enough, with Roberto, we started developing a lot, and I started to finish on the podium constantly. And I won that same year. I won in Miami again, finished on the podium in Mexico City, and many other races, Germany, England. And I finished 6th in the championship, I think. So that was very good to have a guy like Roberto come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Miami. Obviously, did that feel vindicating to get that victory there? And it was, to me, very decisive. You were all out during that race. What are your memories from that day?
Yeah, that was great. Even vindicating from our first, like, if you want to call it, real podium in Brands Hatch in England, then Germany right away, where I almost won, had the officials not given me an unfair penalty, but I finished 2nd there. And Miami was awesome because There was a lot of Mexican people there. I started in 8th position, I think. The team did a great job in the pits. I think I passed 1 or 2 cars, and the rest, some of the guys in the front started, crashing by themselves or with others. So we ended up in the lead, in second, and then I passed, I think, Darren Manning for the lead, and the win was fantastic. And not only that, is that Roberto Moreno finished second. So we managed to have the first 1-2 finish for the Herdez competition team in history, and the only one. And that was incredible because, like I say, so much money, so many millions spent by this company and the owner of Herdez, Enrique Hernandez Pons, with so much love for racing, to finally get that for his team. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, and I just watched that broadcast the other day in preparation for this, and one of the things I think Bob Varsha mentioned was that you started taking an IV drip before the races as part of your regular preparation. Did you find that made a significant difference for you as part of your race day prep?
I only did it when it was very hot, and I did it in Miami. And I believe that was the first time I had ever done it, because it was so hot that just walking out to the pits, you would start sweating like crazy. Just, you won't believe how hot that was. And inside the car, of course, you sweat even more. So you could get dehydrated in 20 minutes. So I thought, oh man, this is not going to be so good. So I went to the Kart Medical Center. Asked them if they could give me an IV. So they gave me the IV before the race, and it was definitely helpful, I'll have to say. Then after that, some drivers learned about it, and they copied me, and they started going to the medical center, until finally there was so many drivers there before a lot of the races that they stopped doing it. They said no more IVs for the drivers. But it was in the race in Monterrey, Mexico. I did it again, but then I had a doctor coming and do it to me at the track, because the Champ Car Medical Center, they wouldn't do it. But it's definitely helpful for sure.
Yeah, that's a funny story about all the drivers showing up. Well, you had a great points finish in 2004. I think you finished 5th, and then you actually had the opportunity to move over to Forsythe Racing, who had won the championship with Paul Tracy in 2003. How did that deal come together?
Well, basically, there was a problem within the company of Herdez, and they decided they were not going to continue sponsoring motorsports anymore, which was very sad after so many years, and especially sad for the owner, who was the president, and then he became vice president. So the board of directors decided no more racing sponsorship. So they were leaving. Forsythe found out, and they were just interested in hiring me. So I talked to Mr. Forsythe. He said, I'd like you to come race for me next year. I said, sure. And so I asked Herdez if they would release me from the contract, since they were not going to be racing anymore. They said, fine, no problem. And I went up to Forsythe, which was incredible, because back then it was the best 2 teams were Newman Haas and Forsythe. So I finally made it to the top, basically. And then with Paul Tracy as my teammate. And that didn't turn out the way I was hoping for, because the whole team was based around Paul. And I would compare it as if someone would go to drive for Red Bull, and this is what's happening to every driver that goes to Red Bull that has Verstappen as a teammate. The whole team is based around Verstappen, around his driving style, around his setup, and the drivers that come in basically have to adapt to that in order to stay there. But it's very hard to adapt to a car that you can't drive, or is based on the other guy's style. And Paul Tracy was extremely fast, but in a car that was very hard to drive, and I couldn't drive it. So every time I would work with the engineers to have my setup, put it in the car the way I would like it, I was able to go faster than Paul a few times, but that didn't go so well with the team. So basically, in 2005, I didn't do as well as I was hoping for. 2006, I started the season pretty good because they gave me an engineer that I liked so much, that I pushed for him to come, that right now everybody loves. His name is Michael Cannon. And I pushed for Michael to come work with me because I had worked with Michael in Herdez. I pushed for him to come to Herdez. Then I went to Forsythe and I asked Forsythe to bring him to me, please. And they did it. But then we started with that problem again. My whole car was completely different than Paul's. And the moment I started to go fast, that didn't go so well with anybody. And then I made a mistake in Long Beach and I crashed him. And Paul, being the number one driver, didn't leave me in a good position. And in Milwaukee, I crashed with Juncker, but Paul was coming in behind and he ended up being involved in that crash. And Mr. Forsythe was not happy and he fired me. So that was basically what happened.
Gotcha. Well, if you don't mind me asking a couple questions from your time with Forsythe, one of the races that you guys did in 2005 was the brand new San Jose Grand Prix. I'm only asking about this is because I lived in San Jose for many, many years and went to all three of those races. But one of the things I remember from that race was the railroad tracks the first year when you guys hit those railroad tracks and you went flying up in the air. What are your memories of that specific event, if you don't mind my asking?
The first and the second, I mean, part of the cool thing about Champ Car is that we would basically take the show to many, many cities into the city, right? You wouldn't have to have the people come to the racetrack, but we would take the show to a city like San Jose or Long Beach or Toronto or Houston, places like that. And San Jose, those railroad tracks were crazy. I don't know why nobody ever thought about that, but every time we hit them, we would fly. And your head would hurt a lot. It was pretty crazy. And the second year, there was not much improvement either. But the rest of the whole situation was fun. I always enjoyed racing on the streets. I was good at the street circuits. I was usually pretty good and fast. So yeah, those railroad tracks, I remember them, and my head still hurts.
Yeah, mine hurts from watching it. And then another thing that happened, I think, during the 2005 season in Toronto is AJ Allmendinger had gotten into the wall, and I don't think they had thrown the caution yet. And
Oh,
you came around a blind corner and collided with him. What are your memories from that day?
that was a horrible crash. Exactly. He was in front of me like two or three cars. And all of a sudden, I came out of the corner. The other guys managed to save it. They didn't crash against him. And I just found them exactly in front of me because I was following the guy in front very close. So I thought before coming to the corner, I'm going to try to get on the gas as soon as possible. So when we exit the corner, I'll be able to take a run on him on the straight and try to pass him on the braking for the next corner. So I did that, and my trajectory was a little bit wider than usual because of that. And all of a sudden, I encountered AJ exactly in front of me, and I T-boned him. It was a very hard hit. Very hard hit. My head still hurts from that one. But thanks God, nothing serious happened to either him or me. But yeah, my car was destroyed.
Yeah, I remember that. Watching that, very scary. Glad you both were okay. On a positive note, one of the things I believe that happened in 2005, and I just read this online. I didn't actually see it myself, obviously, but did you test with Eddie Jordan in Formula One in 2005?
I did. It was my goal to go to Formula One. And we did a test in Silverstone. And then I was going to go back to test in Barcelona. but I stayed in Mexico to raise the money for the sponsorship. We had everything negotiated. I stayed in Silverstone. Back then, Eddie Jordan was selling the team, so it was changing hands. It was becoming Midland Formula One team. So we negotiated for like 3 days there. Everything was done. I pretty much had the sponsors, and it looked like I was going to go to Formula One. And then all of a sudden, the team called me and says, "Well, Tiago Monteiro come up with, I think, $15 million. And then the other guy was an Indian guy, Narain Kartikeyan, I believe. He came up with 20. So since you only have 7, you'll be able to stay as the test driver, the reserve driver." I said, "Sure. Nobody's going to give me that amount of money to not drive a car, but maybe once during the year." So yeah, that didn't happen. But yeah, it had always been my goal to go there.
Gotcha. And then so we kind of covered what happened at Forsythe, but you still ended up racing for a couple different teams in the 2006 season, including at Surfers Paradise. I think you were with Rocket Sports, and you actually finished second there in a very impressive finish. What were your memories from that? And after being let go by Forsythe, how good did that feel to get up on that podium?
Well, after Forsythe, I went to my good friend Dale Coyne. He gave me the opportunity right away. I went to race for him, but man, it was just so hard to be driving a car that could win every race like Forsythe and going to a car that would be, at the back every race. And then, although given that I was going to score, I think it was the first podium ever for Dale Coyne in Cleveland in that race, and with 1 lap to go, I think I was third, and Dan Clark crashed into me, and I had absolutely nowhere to go. He was a lap car or something, and it just all of a sudden, like, I couldn't avoid him for anything. So that was the end of that first podium. Then Rocket Sports called me. I went to race for them in Road America and Surfers Paradise, and I finished second in Surfers Paradise. I should have won, honestly, but I went to pass Nelson Philippe, and I should have been a little bit more aggressive on that pass. I thought maybe I could have. I was not aggressive enough. But anyways, that second place, that podium finish, tasted really good. It was very good for the team, who had not finished on the podium, I think, for like 2 years, with Tagliani, last one that finished there. So it was very good. It was very good for me too. It was fun. I always did well in Australia. I always did well. I had another podium there. One time I was also fighting for the podium, and my tire came off, so I always did good there.
Yeah, good on street courses. And then the next year, 2007, Champ Car got a new car, the Panos, I think the DP01. And ironically, you ended back up with Forsythe for the first few races of the year. So I guess if you're open to sharing, how did you end up back with Forsythe? And then I'd love to hear your opinion on comparing and contrasting the DP01 with the Lolas that you guys were racing the year before.
Yeah, yeah. All of a sudden, they called me back again. They said, "You want to race for us?" I said, "Sure." But then that was a very hard thing to do, though. Going back, I shouldn't have done it, because then they were very clear, absolutely clear, that I would have to run exactly what Paul Tracy was running in his car. So it was impossible, very hard for me to drive it. I could not drive it, basically. So I did it for like 3 races, and it didn't go well. And then I ended up without a team. And then I sort of, like, for some reason, something would always happen at a race here and there, and I would be called in to substitute someone. I did it once in PKV. I did once in HVM, what used to be Herdez, when Dan Clark got banned from racing. I think it was in Belgium or Holland, I don't remember. when we went to race there. And so finally, I think it was Pacific Coast Motorsports that got me for the races to finish the year. But the difference between the panels and the Lola were very big. I much more enjoyed driving the Lola than the panels. First of all, because we had the sequential gearbox, and for me, shifting is a lot more fun. I don't enjoy the paddle shifts as much as when you actually have to take your hands off the wheel. So I enjoyed that. And the panels was, I would say, like like a lighter car to drive. The other one was heavier. You had to really manhandle the Lola a lot more. Um, they were both good. I think the panels was faster in the end, but I really enjoyed racing the Lola. I think it was for me one of the most fun cars that has ever existed in motor racing.
Yeah, well, one of the cool things of history is that you were on the podium for the very last Champ Car race ever. I think
Yes,
2008 with Pacific Coast Motorsport. How cool of that to be part of that history.
that was awesome because Pacific Coast gave me the shot, and I gave Pacific Coast also their very first podium. And I was on like you say, the last Champ Car race on the podium. I think it was Will Power, another guy who had coming from Formula One. I think was Frank Montagna, something like that. I don't remember. And then myself, and it was a huge celebration. I think I started the race in 11 or something. I made some very good passes. Unfortunately, on TV they never showed, which I think is one of the best passes of my career. The one I did on Tagliani, that race. They were showing some other images, and so that was a very cool race. And to give Pacific Coast Motorsports the podium was also very satisfying for me because those guys really deserve it. Tyler, who you know very well, Tyler Tadevic was the team manager, and everybody else. It was like a family. That team it was like not like a regular race team. Tyler ran it more like a family, like a bunch of friends, going racing. It was very interesting the way he managed the team. And that doesn't mean it was not managed professionally. It was very professional, but the atmosphere there was, they were based in California. Everybody was like relaxed and cool, and just it was such a fun team to race for.
Yeah, you mentioned Tyler from True Speed Autosport. What a great guy. He's the one that actually put us together. So I do want to shout him out, and I appreciate you mentioning him. What
Exactly,
a
yeah.
great guy.
Tyler Tadevic, my man.
Yeah, he is a huge supporter of this podcast, and I'm glad we got to mention him.
Oh, cool.
And speaking of Truce, of Pacific Coast Motorsport, so Champ Car and the IRL merge. It now became essentially what is now the modern day IndyCar series again, after being apart for several years. And you guys decided to take a stab at joining the new IndyCar series, but they were using those old IRL cars. Talk to me about the challenges of trying to transition over to that combined series with those old IRL cars.
Well, the cars really sucked, as far as the technology and the way the cars drove compared to the Champ Car. They sucked, basically. They were terrible. Um, it just felt like, I don't know, big heavy tanks, and the engine wasn't that fast. The cars were not that fast either. Um, but then, yes, Pacificos pretty much ended because the owner, who was Mr. Figgy, wonderful person, him and his wife, and their son Alex, who was also my teammate, wonderful family, decided that we're not going to continue in racing because IRL posted a big risk with all the ovals. And as you know, so many drivers had gotten hurt big time in those ovals, and they didn't want Alex, his son, to take that risk. So they said, that's it, we're out of motorsports. So they made a deal with Tyler Tadevic So he would keep the team. He would become not the team manager anymore. He would become the owner. And then because I had been racing the last few races with them, we try to work out a deal to continue for the IRL that year and put some sponsorship together from Mexico and whatever we could get from the US as well. But it was so hard to try to compete against teams that had been racing the same cars for many years. And we had very good engineering. And we managed to show some speed in some races, but with a low budget, no testing, and zero knowledge of the cars, with engineers that came from other categories like Champ Car, we had to start from zero, from scratch. So we did what we could. We went to Indianapolis with a super, like, zero experience with from anybody in the team. Engineering side, we were good, but as you know, there's so many things that go around not just an engineer. You have to have the cars, they have to build up, be built up perfectly, the shocks, the wind tunnel, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it was impossible for us to qualify. We didn't have the budget or the experience or the tools to do anything. So, but we almost did it. But in the end of the day, we couldn't do it, and it was a hard hit for everybody. And that was the end of that adventure.
Yeah, and we should shout out the episode that you participated with Dinners with Racers. They did an excellent episode on the events of you trying to qualify for that Indianapolis 500. It's a must watch, and I'll link it in the description below when I publish this. Such a good episode. But as we kind of close out here, I know you mentioned, when you talk about your favorite tracks, you seem to do really well at Surfers Paradise. Were there any other tracks you absolutely just loved racing at or going to?
Well, I did very well, like I say, in the street courses. And I think not only me, but every other driver's favorite place to race was Australia. I think everybody you ask will tell you the same. I used to enjoy racing in Vancouver. And as far as a racetrack, like a real racetrack, and pretty much every other driver will agree with me, Road America is very cool. It's a fantastic track to race at. And in the US, I would have to say Laguna Seca as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up going to Laguna Seca all the time. I love that track. And finally, as we
Beautiful.
close out here, I ask everyone that comes on this show if they could give advice to someone that is wanting to pursue a career in IndyCar racing. Given your experience, what advice would you give that person today?
Well, this is the same advice I give to the drivers that I coach, is that never give up, no matter what happens, no matter what they tell you, no matter what you encounter. Because look at me, for example, if you go, we just did a short, version of what I had to go through. But as I was on my way to go to IndyCar, I was only 18. I had already won the chance to race an Indy Lights race, and then I couldn't race there anymore. So I came back to Mexico and basically also here start from scratch, trying to get opportunities. And it took me 7 years to get back to the US again to race Indy Lights. And then so many other things happened that we would be talking here for 24 hours. But my career is just basically, I guess it's like a story of perseverance and never giving up. And therefore, you create your own luck. You're there at the right time with the right person, but you create those opportunities. It's not like everything came to me. I worked my way and I found it, and I was able to put things together because of my persistence to get to the highest level of motorsport. So I would say never give up, no matter what happens. Just keep fighting, keep pushing, because if I was able to do it, anybody can do it.
Well, great advice, and I appreciate you sharing so much and being so candid about your career. This was a huge honor to be able to interview you. Thanks for coming on, Mario.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thank you for thinking of me, and all the best to all your viewers, and kind regards. You can follow me. You can still follow my racing career in my social media if you want. It's Super Mario Domínguez. That's what the commentators here in Mexico call me, Super Mario. So that's where I am in all the social media, Super Mario Domínguez.
Yeah, we'll link your socials in the, I'll link it in the description in the comments below. Yeah, absolutely. You have really high quality social media. Well, all right, Mario, I appreciate it, man. This was awesome.